Hello, long time no see. If you're new here, my name is Neve, and I also feel like I'm new here because it's been so absurdly long since I've posted anything on this channel. I have neglected it, or, well, actually, I abandoned it. But I'm back. I missed it so much. I loved making, particularly the book videos, and I feel like I now have just about enough free time in my life that I can try and come back to this, which is so exciting. So I'm going to try and come back. My goal for coming back is to try and do my one monthly reading roundup, and then if I manage something else, that's a bonus, and if I don't, it's no big deal. I feel like if I put a lot of pressure on it, we're immediately going to fail before we start, and I don't want to do that because it brought me a lot of joy to make these, and I'd like to get that back. So we're going to give it a go. If you are new here, my name is Neve. I like to read and I love theatre, and most of my videos will probably be about one of those two things. And I'm really excited to have you. If you're not new here, first of all, that's real loyalty, and I respect that because I've been gone a long time. Secondly, I'll give a quick life update before we start if you don't follow me elsewhere. First things first, I have a proper career. Just terrifying to say, I'm not old enough to have a career. Let it be known that it's a career that I frequently wear jorts to, just to balance that. But I am a hairdresser. It takes up most of my time. I love it. It's great. I work with some absolutely insanely and incredibly talented people that I feel really lucky to get to watch do their jobs every day. And it is not, I think, what I thought had you asked me when I used to make these videos what I thought I was going to be doing 3-4 years down the line. But I'm so glad that it is what I'm doing 3-4 years down the line because I love my job. So yeah, people pay me to touch their hair now. How exciting. It actually is really exciting, can't lie. But yeah, that's my big life update, is that I'm a hairdresser now, as opposed to being unemployed like I was previously. I think that's it. So we'll start and we'll see how we get on. I'm really excited. I'm really excited to be back. Um, Pause this, go and get a drink, put your electric blanket on, fill up a hot water bottle, all of the things that I do when I'm watching these, and yeah, we'll start. I have got my. This is really exciting. So I turned 21 last year, and in my work we have a thing where if you have like a big birthday, we all like group together to get a birthday present, and usually it's like nice jewelry or like something meaningful, and it's great and I love it and I like seeing everyone get excited about what they got. So it's my 21st last year, so of course everyone like pulled to get me some really lovely birthday presents, chief among which was a reading journal. So that tells you that I fundamentally have not changed since you last seen me. This is my reading journal. I love it, and I am very pleasantly surprised with myself that I have stuck at filling it out, because I've had things like this before and I've not been great at keeping on top of them. But I think that's because they've just not been as good as this one. I love this one. It's perfect. It has all of the things that I think it has to have, nothing that I think it doesn't have to have. Everything is like got enough space. You can like write on the paper without the ink bleeding through, unless you go really heavy handed, which I do sometimes do, but then that's my fault. And I just think it's great. So if you're looking for a reading journal, mine is from Once Upon a Tuesday, and I love it. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. But some of the books that I've read this year have been ebooks, which I don't usually do. This is a new thing for me. So I've got my reading journal with me so that I don't forget one, because I will, basically, is what will happen. I'll forget because I don't have it to hold. So if you see me side eyeing, there isn't someone there that I'm making really angry faces at. It is my reading journal. The other thing, actually, that's fun that I should note is that last year, me and my best friends started a book club. I basically badgered them about it until they agreed. And now it is like the highlight of my month. I love that we get to have like an experience together all month, even when we're not talking all the time or seeing each other. and that we have like a guaranteed way that we're all going to like speak to each other and see each other and catch up, and also we get to talk about books. So it's a win-win for me. So if I'm telling you about book club books and we've already had the book club meeting, I will talk a little bit about that. But if not, then really sadly and unfortunately for you, you're going to have to just take my opinion for it. Sucks. Anyway, let's not dilly dally any further because I'm too excited. Let's get started. So, the first book that I read in January of this year, I feel really weird with this microphone. I just want to make that be known actually before I start. I've never had a microphone before, but my house is very loud, and I'm hoping that if I funnel my sound here, you might not be able to hear the fact that my boiler is screaming in the background. It might not work, but I'm enjoying very delicately holding my tiny microphone. Anyway, the first book that I read in January was December's book club book. Being a hairdresser in December is crazy, and I didn't have time to read at all, pretty much. So I had to finish this one in the new year before we had our meeting, and it's Flowers in the Attic by VC Andrews. Now, when my friend Anna picked this book, I have read this before, and I thought, do you know what? That's a great pick for book club, but I don't own a copy anymore. I'll have to buy one. So we all went on to World of Books to buy our copy. All of us who didn't have one went to World of Books, which is my favorite website ever, to buy a copy of Flowers in the Attic. And all of us placed the order for our copy of Flowers in the Attic to a book that looked like this. It's ugly. I'm like, let's just be honest. It's not necessarily a book cover you would display. All of my friends arrived first, and they all got such cool, like very 70s film poster esque copies of Flowers in the Attic. So, me, being a fool, got my hopes up, thinking, great, that's what's coming to me too. Of course, that was not what came for me too. I don't have that kind of luck. I got this one, and I'm mad about it. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I'm not pleased, but it is what it is. Anyway, Flowers in the Attic. If you don't know anything about Flowers in the Attic, first of all, lucky you. It must be nice to be free of sin. Second of all, I'll give a quick summary. There are four children who live with their mother and father, and they are like this perfect, like, nuclear family in America, white picket fence. Their parents are so in love, and they all look alike, and they all have names that begin with C, and all of their neighbors are jealous of them, and they have this like perfect life. And one day their dad dies in a car accident on his birthday, and their life like falls apart. And their mum is like, by the way, guys, lol, sorry that I didn't tell you this before, but I'm actually like super minted. My parents have so much money. So we're going to go back and stay with them for a bit. Here's the catch though. My dad doesn't like that I married your dad. So he cut me off from the inheritance, and he doesn't know I've got wings. So what we're going to have to do is pretend I don't have wings until he forgives me. So you're going to like go up in the attic. And she puts her four kids in an attic in her parents' house where their gran watches over them, who has got some like real Jesus like fanatic behaviors. And they basically stay up there for a really long time, and things get really weird. I have never been so, like, I don't think I've ever read a book that I have found so absurd and yet been so compelled by, in a way that isn't even like, you know, when you read something that's like really dark or really shocking and you can't help but find yourself be drawn to it because it's so horrible. It isn't even that, although it feels like it should be that. It's genuinely like magnificently written and very compelling, and you find yourself like so intensely rooting for these children, particularly Kathy, who narrates the novel, who is the older daughter. Even though some of the stuff that they get up to in there is absurd, and like that they just shouldn't be doing. I don't want to spoil it. I can't spoil it, but like they go a little bit nuts, you know, as you would, as you would. Um, I love this. There are three more of these. I've read the second one. The second one's even more nuts. I read the second one like a long time ago. I would unironically really enjoy reading the rest of the series. I think though only if we did it as book club, because part of the fun was texting each other whilst we were reading it, being like, guys, guys, I can't do this anymore. I cannot do this anymore. So maybe we'll do the sequel's called Petals on the Wind. Maybe we'll do Petals on the Wind at some point this year for book club, because if you have a book club with your friends and you're struggling to think of what to read, I genuinely think giving something like this a go is a great idea. And I know that this is not like a new thought, it's a very popular book. VC Andrews is a very well known author. All of her stuff is, I think, this same kind of like really dark and nuts life story esque situation. And she's very good at what she does. She was very, very good at what she does. Her writing is so compelling. Some of the writing in this was so beautiful, which made fascinating juxtaposition to like the actual like context of some of the quotes. Like the use of imagery was really, really compelling, and it was just it was brilliant. Like for example, there's a quote near the beginning that says, "We were four children stumbling around in the broken pieces of our grief and loss. We would play in the back garden, trying to find solace in the sunshine, quite unaware that our lives were soon to change so drastically, so dramatically, that the words backyard and garden were to become for us synonyms for heaven, and just as remote." Like you can't really be writing that and then having like some of the weird ass stuff that happened in this book go on. But she did, and it works, and it's brilliant. I think I gave this 4.5 stars. Like I really went in strong with that one, and I stand by that. If you're looking to be both horrified and deeply entertained and feel really, really bad for some kids who are making some really stupid decisions, give it a go. My friends and I love doing this as a book club book. We love talking about it. We love texting about it. The book club meeting was so much fun. I highly recommend. The next book I read, I don't have on me because I've lent it to a friend, and it was For Real by Alexis Hall. Now, this was true before I disappeared, and it's true now. I love Alexis Hall. If Alexis Hall writes something, I'm going to read it. Bottom line, I think his book Boyfriend Material is one of the best rom coms maybe ever written. I love it so much, and I've made all my friends read it, and they all love it. I don't fuck about Lucian and Oliver. I take Boyfriend Material very seriously. So when Alexis Hall writes literally anything else, I'm going to read it. And he's recently republished some of his older novels and novellas in like this series called the Spires series. And I've decided to work my way through them. So For Real is one of those novels in the Spire series, which follows a trauma surgeon or a trauma doctor who is largely into the BDSM community and is kind of like struggling to find his place within said community after splitting up with his ex partner. And he meets this guy in a nightclub who is, I think he's like 19, who's like never been in a kink club before. And he's like desperate to like get involved and like find his place. And they end up having this very kind of like odd but very formative relationship and BDSM dynamic. And it was actually really interesting. There is a quite an age gap, which I think you should be aware of when you go in because it's not some people's bag. What I thought was quite interesting, and what Alexis Hall mentions in the author's note, is what people tend to do when they write these like age gap romances, especially when they have a lot of sex in them and when they are um on that more like kinky end, as a lot of romance novels veer into nowadays. um the default is to have this like older financially stable partner who is the dominant partner and has all this control and has all this power and like really takes advantage of the pre-existing power dynamics between them to build the relationship off. and sometimes that can feel a little bit icky. So, what I thought was quite interesting about this one is that the younger character was the more dominant partner within their dynamic and had an absurd amount of control and power over the character that in a book like this you would assume would be the person who had power and was exploiting power. And I thought that that was quite interesting. Do I think it's for everybody? No. Do I necessarily think that it is absolutely for me? Also, no. I enjoyed reading it and I thought it was quite interesting. And I actually thought it was like, it was a nice change in a lot of ways from books that normally exist within that kind of like niche in the genre, in that there was a lot of character development, there was a lot of emotional depth. It was like very aware of what it was and what it was doing, and had a story and had like a kind of moral checkpoint, and had like this like very fleshed out character driven romance within it. It wasn't just about these two people who were like having a lot of sex and being kind of mean to each other, which for me is better. It's not everyone's bag, but I would like them to like each other. Novel, you know. Is it my favorite Alexis Hall novel? No, but I'm glad I checked it off the list of trying to get through every single book in his canon. I think I gave it 3 stars. It's currently on loan to my best friend because it is kind of more in her wheelhouse, and I will let you know what she thinks of it when I find out. The next book that I read in January is a steep left turn from that. And it was January's book club pick, and it was American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. This is one of those books that they tell you that like you should make sure that you read before you die. Like it's, you know, it's like one of the books. So I knew that I would have to get around to it at some point. So I was quite glad when my friend Rowan picked it for book club that it gave me an excuse to get around to it at some point, which some point was now. However, I never want to read this book again. I didn't hate this book. Like I genuinely wish I could say I hated this book because it would make reviewing it much easier. But I didn't. But it was horrible to read. And that's the point. And that's okay. But I never want to do it again. I think one of the things for me which was interesting about reading this book now is that when this book came out, the point that it was making about like capitalism and the patriarchy and making heroes out of white men and those kind of things somehow felt like novel points to be made. They were like new ideas for a lot of people. It's why when Fight Club came out about the same time that they got so much comparison and like they blew up so much, and you know, yada yada yada. The issue is reading this now is that I know that capitalism is bad. And I know that wealth breeds evil. Most people know that now, which I do think makes the more unsavory aspects of this book much less worth reading. And maybe you don't agree with me, that's okay, but that's kind of my take. And also, the interesting thing for me is that the unsavory elements of reading this book weren't necessarily like the absurd, gratuitous violence towards women, which was obviously horrible to read. But like, it made sense to me that that was a thing that was happening, and that like it also made sense to me why it was so gratuitous and why it was so extreme and so twisted and so sick. What actually was so unbearable to read was just the lists of things that he had, which again, I understand why they were there and I understand the point that they were portraying. But there is like no way in my brain that I was ever going to read that as anything other than like, stop buying so much shit. Like, I'm not interested. So I just was like so put off him from the get go. And also, like, what I did find quite redeeming about it though Because I feel like when you watch the film, they paint Patrick Bateman as kind of like very charming and very suave, and then he has this like batshit like alter ego. But when you're reading it, like he actually is a riot. Like he's a total mess. He's a loser. He's like the scene near the beginning where he's in the lift up to his apartment and he's like bragging about how fancy his apartment is, and then he's like, and Tom Cruise lives in my building. In fact, oh, Tom Cruise is in the lift, and then he compliments Tom Cruise on a film that's not a real film, and Tom Cruise is like, I don't, that's not what the film's called. One of the best bits of the book for me, genuinely, because I like when he got put on the back foot, and I like when he seemed like a person, and I liked when you knew that his narration of himself was embellished or was flawed or was unreliable. Because at the end of the day, that's what Patrick Bateman is. He's an incredibly unreliable narrator. You leave the book not knowing if he's actually even done any of the things that he's told you that he's done, if he's committed any of the violence that he says he's committed, yada yada yada. I'm glad I read it. I found it interesting to read in a lot of ways, and I think that if I was going to read it, I'm glad I read it for book club. However, I never want to watch the film, and I don't ever want to read this book again. And that's okay. That is okay. Also, like, sorry, Tim Price, I think that's his name. Why does he just, like, run away and then just come back 20 pages from the end and is like, yeah, what are you even worrying about? I'm back. What are you even thinking about? And they just never, like, so infuriating. Where does he fuck off to? Why, like, because he's so unlikable as well. Like, I didn't spend the whole book being like, oh my god, where's Tim? I couldn't care less where Tim was. I was glad I didn't have to listen to Tim open his mouth and speak. But then why bring him back and then be like, don't even worry about it. Don't even worry about it. Like, who cares where he was? He's back. I'm like, I didn't care where he was until you brought him back. Now I want to know where he went. And they don't tell you. So that's really shit. Anyway, there are so many people watching this video just now who just absolutely fuming with every word that's just come out my mouth about American Psycho. Sorry. That's all I can do is apologize. Anyway, next book. This was a Christmas present from my brother's girlfriend, and I so excited because I really wanted to read this book. I've seen people talking about it online for ages, and it seemed like a bit of me. Uh, so I had to read it, and it was Sunburn by Chloe Michelle Howarth. This follows a young girl called Lucy who is growing up in the 90s in a rural farming village in Ireland. And Lucy is gay, but she doesn't know it yet. And it's this like really interesting coming of age story about what it's like to grow up queer in Ireland, in like a rural town, especially in a rural town that's like very funded on Catholicism or like Christianity, and how that then breeds compulsory heterosexuality, and how you can experience such intense compet whilst literally being in a lesbian relationship. And it was so beautiful in some ways, and like so like some of the lines in it, and like the imagery and the like kind of like stream of consciousness moments were like gorgeous and really like compelling, and really like evoked like genuine like emotion um from me, and were like really hooked me in and made me feel so much empathy and just like love for these like two or three main characters. But also it's like so sad in some places and so frustrating in some places, because it isn't always as simple as just being like, yeah, well, I've now figured out that I'm a lesbian and I'm just gonna like live like that. But that's not how it works for a lot of people, even now, especially then. And it was a really fascinating look into that, and to the way that you can spiral so far removed from yourself and who you actually are and what you actually want and what serves you, from sheer fear and sheer shame. And I really recommend it. I think I gave this 3.5 stars or 4 stars. I thought it was great. There are some bits where the imagery like got a bit much for me, like it got a bit flowery, and I like poetic prose or like lyrical prose. The flowery, the better for me sometimes. But there were a couple of bits of this that just felt like a bit on the nose. It was giving milk and honey a little bit in some places, but I think that that was maybe because there was also so much like of the book that was very pragmatic and very simple and very like grounded, and the company sometimes when it then got that little bit more flowery or that little bit more lyrical, the shift threw me off a little bit. But all in all, I really really recommend this one. Also, the opening line of this book is "Now is the time between birth and slaughter," which I just think is a spectacular opener, and enough enough to like suggest you give it a go. Sunburn by Chloe Michelle Howarth. It was good. It was good, and I read it really quickly too. Like it was very what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, but I got absorbed in it very quickly and stayed absorbed in it. There was no point where I was like, oh, I can't really bother with this, or like my attention was waning. Like I think I basically read this in like one go. So give it a go. Next up, I read a series of books. This is where we start getting kind of like fun and random because I clearly had too much time on my hands, I suppose. So the first book in this series that I read was The Magpie Lord by K.J. Charles, which is book one in a series called A Charm of Magpies. There are two more books. The second one is called A Case of Possession, and the third one is called Flight of Magpies. Okay, so here's the deal. I'm one video back, and already I'm having tech issues. Sod's law. So I filmed this video the other day, and then I went back to edit it, and my sound completely cut off in the last 10 minutes. I think my mic ran out of battery. So I have charged it. I don't know if I've charged it enough. We'll find out. If it happens to me again, I might give up. I'm not going to lie to you, but I'm back. Let's finish the video. I couldn't leave it unfinished. Okay, so before I was very rudely interrupted by my technology failing me, I had just started telling you guys about A Charm of Magpies by K.J. Charles, the trilogy. Loads of fun. A Charm of Magpies is a historical romance fantasy trilogy that follows Lucien Vaudrey, who has just returned from 20 years in exile in China because his brother and his father have both suddenly died of suicide within like a year of each other, and he has inherited an earldom. So he's had to come back from China, where he's actually kind of living his best life, can't lie, to get his affairs in order and take over his family estate. And he hates his dad and he hates his brother, okay? And it turns out so does everybody else because they suck big time. And he comes home and he's like, oh, this is so annoying. I hate this. I hate England. But also, he's cursed. And he keeps having these moments of just like absolute horrifying, bleak madness where the only thing he can think about and the only thing he's capable of doing is attempting to end his own life. And him and his manservant Merrick, who by the way is an icon, are like, this is horrific. We have to do something about this. So they try and find a wizard. In the book, they're called practitioners, or Lucian often refers to them as shamans, because that's what they were referred to in China, where he's just lived for 20 years. So they find this guy who's called Stephen Day to come and try and break his curse. And Stephen gets there and he takes one look at him and he's like, "You're Vaudrey. I hate you guys, actually. Because your dad and your brother ruined my family's life and ruined my dad's career, and we've lived in like hell and abject poverty my whole life because of your family, so I'm not going to help you." And Lucian's like, "Okay, fair enough, but could you maybe find me someone else who could?" And Stephen's like, "Yeah, okay." And then he helps him anyway because he's just such a good person. He's got like a very, very strict, unavoidable sense of duty. That's kind of like his whole battle through all three books, other than like the variety of magical and horrifying battles they actually have to fight. Mostly he's fighting himself and his like absurd sense of justice. So he's trying to like break this curse, and then they like fall in love, obviously, and there's lots of like magic and dark magic and like abuse of power, and there's like this running theme that the like evil practitioners whole thing is that they try and like steal other people's magic and drain the life out of other people to feed their own magic, and Stephen's very against this. So of course they end up tangled up in some sort of like horrific plot to like steal magic, and it's great, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, listen, are they going to win a Nobel Peace Prize? No. Do they heal a small part of my soul? Yes. I thought their relationship was actually quite cool and quite interesting. There is like a really interesting discussion about how you navigate a relationship that has such a wild class divide. And also, Lucian, whilst living in China, has lived like a relatively unburdened life in terms of his sexuality. He's been able to just like do whatever he wants, essentially. And he's come back to England, and England does not like that. And he's really mad about it and really confused by it and not quite sure how to navigate this. Whereas Stephen has never lived elsewhere and is very much feeling the English shame about it all, and it is quite interesting to watch them try to navigate that. And I think it's done in a way that is as realistic as it can be for a lightning fast paced historical fantasy romance. You know, I enjoyed it. The second one has massive killer rats that can be like summoned via magic, which I think is all you can actually ask for in a book, if I'm being honest. They're great. I think I gave them all 3 stars. I'm not sure I can justify actually giving them any more, but I had a grand old time reading them, and I read them all really quickly. They were a bit of fun. I think I feel about KJ Charles similarly, but not as strongly as I feel about Alexis Hall, in that what she does incredibly well, and in a way that is incredibly addicting. And I'm trying to work my way through her whole canon. Some of them I will purchase copies of. I I would like the next 2 copies of these in a paperback. Some of them are really ugly. I can't lie, so I might keep them as ebooks. Some of those covers are screaming out in um, made on Pixar, so I might keep them in the ebook file instead of on my shelf. But that's because I'm a snob, so what can you do? The other book I read in January, which I'm aware is too many books to read in 1 month, and a level which I will absolutely not be able to sustain for the rest of the year, just letting you guys know that now, was A Thief and a Gentleman by Arden Powell, which is part of a series of books that I don't know how to pronounce the name of. I think it might be Latin or Latin inspired. I don't want to make a fool of myself, so I'll just like put it here. A Thief and a Gentleman follows a man called Sebastian, who is a con man and a thief, and all around ever so slightly morally bankrupt, but in a way that's like charming and sexy. And he's not like killing folk. There's not a lot of violence involved. He just likes to steal stuff, basically. And he has just been dumped by a man who he thought would be a very easy target to con into a kind of like sugar baby esque situation. And instead, it didn't really work out, which has never happened to him before, and he's sulking. And he goes to a gentleman's club with a friend of his to try and find his like newest victim for a con. And he bumps into this man called Morgan Hollycock, which, by the way, is an absolutely phenomenal name, topped only by his cousin, who is the protagonist of one of the other books in the series, who's called Alphonse Hollycock. Banger. Anyway, he bumps into Morgan and he's like, "Shit, I know you." Turns out, childhood best friends, because of course they're childhood best friends. And he decides that he has to come up with some sort of plot to spend more time with Morgan and reconnect with him, because the nostalgia hits him hard. And I think this summer in which they were friends is kind of the last good memories Sebastian has before his life kind of went to shit. And he's trying to like find some sort of like joy and whimsy in a life that's clearly not massively full of it at the moment. And so he elaborates an absolutely absurd plot that somehow Morgan goes along with because he's bored. basically, and it's a lot of fun. What I quite like about all of the books in these series now that I've since read more of them, but not in January, so you'll have to wait. You'll have to be patient. Is that a lot of there's a couple of the books that have main characters that live in similar styles, like not massively by the book, and not one of these books are those characters the ones that go, do you know what? I've learned a lesson. I'll change something about my behavior for the relationship to work. It's always the one who is like slightly less morally bankrupt and like a little bit less nuts. Who's like, do you know what? If you want to steal the crown jewels, you steal the crown jewels. I'll buy you a nice suit to wear whilst you do it. And to be honest, I think that's great. And I actually think it's part of what makes the books work so well, because it's not just like another he's seen the light and repented for his sins and now he's lovable. It's just that like he's kind of a little bit dodge, but his heart is mostly in a good place and he's fun. And people who are slightly a little bit dodge also usually deserve to be loved. Also, there's like weirdly for a book that is both quite short and mostly quite unserious, a very interesting discussion of what it was like to live in that era of London and the kind of massive class divide that existed at that time. Morgan is very much of the like upper levels of society, has never had to really work for his money, he just has it. Hence why he's so bored. Whereas Sebastian comes from a family of people who have had to do hard manual labor to get by. And he references how that hard manual labor literally essentially killed his mother over time. And he had to watch that happen. And how it's very easy when you have lots of money and have never had to try very hard to have anything or do anything to judge people for not having honest jobs or for working for a living or for making, to judge them for making sort of like morally dubious choices in order to get by, because you will never understand what it was like to work in the factories and the workhouses of that time, which was, newsflash, a horrible thing to have to do, which I found quite interesting, and I thought it was handled quite well given the context in which it lives, which is an absolute romp of a 1920s fantasy romance. I would give it a go. I would also give the rest of them a go. I won't go into too much detail about the other books in the series because I will talk about them in my February roundup, but they've all been great fun. I can't lie to you. I read one of them last year and I quite enjoyed it and didn't really realize that there were others. So when I did realize there were others, I realized that they were the exact kind of nonsense that makes me feel warm inside. You bet I read all of the rest of them so quickly. So I will go over the other ones in next month's video. But yeah, Thief and Gentleman, great fun. It all ties up absurdly nicely with a bow, as they all do. And if that's your bag, if that kind of like queer rom-com, historical, one of them's an oral type nonsense is your kind of nonsense, and it's my kind of nonsense, then give it a go because it's great fun. And the rest of them are also pretty great fun. Okay, so that is me. That is everything I read in January. If I'm not mistaken, it was 8 books. I might have to do some editing here to prove myself wrong, but I think it was 8 books. I had a great time. I read every day, which is the goal. Go me. And I can't wait to see what February brings. I think I have read 4 so far. So I don't think we're quite going to hit 8, but we might. I'm currently reading a non-fiction called The End of Innocence, which is about the AIDS crisis in Britain. I started reading it in January. I'm taking it slowly because I want to try and like take it in, and it's a lot of information all at once, and it spans a lot of time and it jumps about quite a bit. But it's a period of history which, if you know me, you'll know fascinated by. I want to know everything. So I don't want to read it too quickly and not take it in. So maybe it will be on my February roundup. Maybe it will get pushed to March. I'm chipping away at it. And I'm excited to tell you guys what I think about it when it's done. But I don't want to rush it. So that review will come when it comes. Please let me know what you're reading at the moment, what you read in January that you really enjoyed, what you read in January that you hated. I like an angry book rant too. I can't lie. Sometimes it's fun to be a hater. Thank you for watching. It's very nice to be back. And I will see you guys next month for February's roundup. Have a lovely day. Have a lovely week. I'll see you soon. Goodbye.